Hello, I'm Charles Beckwith, otherwise known as the Fashion Tech Guru, because I tend to work in that space quite a bit. Um, I'm going to try doing video logs. This is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020, and this is my first one. I may continue doing it. This may be a terrible mistake, but we'll see. Um, so I normally host American Fashion Podcast, and I tend to do that every week. We try to put out an episode every week. And this weekend, I edited our episode number 247, which which also I published this weekend, and that was with the three women who run the business side of the Bagley Mishka fashion brand, and that was pretty interesting. They're interesting characters. Um, Back in September of 2019, we interviewed Mark Bagley and James Mishka, who are the designers, and then Christine, Laura, and Kim are on the business side. Kim runs um, the production, all the technical stuff of executing the brand. Laura does the sales, and Christine is the president of the company. She really runs the day to day of the business, and she has a background in licensing. And Bagley Mishka has a huge licensing business where they do shoes and they do children's clothes and all these things. And it was a really interesting interview because we'd had that interview back in September with them, which you can find in the American Fashion Podcast archives. If you go to AmericanFashionPodcast.com and click on archives, we're currently running a special during the crisis where the you can get the archives for half price right now. So usually a fashion brand has two people. If it's a successful brand, it's usually got two people who run it. You've got a creative person and a business person. And very often that's a woman who's the creative and a man who's the business person. But in this case, it's three women who are the business people and two men who are the creatives. So it's five partners in the company. So Kathy and I got to interview them a few weeks ago, and this episode just went up this past weekend. Um, so I think that's worth a listen. I really enjoyed it. But so that means this week I'm going to try and edit episodes 248 and 249. I think 248 I'll get to maybe today or tomorrow, and 249 over the weekend, which means episode 250 of American Fashion Podcast will be released this weekend. I mean, not this weekend, next week. So I don't know how we're gonna celebrate. When we did the 100th episode, we had a big party. 250 seems like a milestone. We've been doing this since 2014. We've had millions and millions of downloads. Thousands of people in the fashion business listen to the show every week, and I don't know, I set out to create what's basically a community radio station for the fashion business because back in 2014 it seemed like a lot of important conversations didn't happen, and I think to a large extent they still don't. People in the fashion business don't tend to publicly talk about difficult topics, so when you start to talk about sustainability, they only want to talk about the things that are working. Um, and I don't have that mentality at all, which is probably why I don't get invited to talk publicly very much by other people. But I have my own show, so it works. Uh, so yeah, 248 and 249. I'm gonna get done this week and this weekend, and then 250 should be out sometime next week. And the guest for episode 250 is very special. I'm looking forward to you all being able to hear that. Um, we've already got episodes up to 251 recorded, and today I'm recording a remote interview with someone, so we'll actually be up to episode 251 recorded. um, I don't like having this giant backlog, and often like we've had like 8 episodes that are not edited yet, that we've recorded, and they haven't been published. and sometimes we go for a couple of weeks without publishing because I get busy with other stuff. But yeah, so I'm excited because we'll be at a point very soon where I'm able to turn the episodes around the same week, because I've been kind of fighting to get back to this point. And with the whole crisis going on, I want to do a bunch of remote interviews and talk to people about what's going on right now, because the whole point of doing American Fashion Podcast was to have it be very current, to be the live wire, to be the direct connection to the community around the fashion business. So having it be very fresh, and if I record it today, within 2 days it's edited and out there for people to listen to. I think that's important, especially right now. So I'm very happy we're getting to that point very soon. Um, and I like the idea of recording history in motion. It's good. It's interesting that how, as I'm going through the episodes that we recorded before the coronavirus thing popped up, how unprepared people seemed. Like they weren't thinking about it at all. They weren't expecting it. So actually, in this most recent episode, I even went in and said this episode was recorded in February, just so our listeners know these people aren't delusional. They said this before this whole thing blew up. So on our website, we've got this form that's the Be a Guest form, on the AmericanFashionPodcast.com website. And sometimes I draw from that to get our guests, but we haven't done that much in the last couple of months because we've had this backlog. And we also have a couple of favorite publicists who always bring us wonderful guests. And they generally get to skip the line because they bring great guests. And what I want to deliver to our listeners is wonderful stories and something great to listen to. So often we go with them instead of going to the list that's come in from the website. But now I think I'm gonna dive into that list. I'm looking forward to that because we have some great submissions in the Be a Guest kind of silo. So I'm going to be reaching out to you if you contacted us that way, and if you have a story to tell right now about your business right now in the fashion business, what's going on. Yeah, just go to AmericanFashionPodcast.com and click on Be a Guest, and there's a form you fill out, and just say hi. We'll be back in touch in a while, probably about 2 weeks, I think, because obviously next week we're putting out episode 250, and 252 will get recorded today. So yeah, it'll be about 3 weeks before we need a new episode, but be looking for that. So this week I'm also spending time on my other projects. One of them is called The Pod, which I'm working on building a technology platform because with podcasts, the advertiser revenue for podcasts in general, not American Fashion Podcast specifically, but it's hard for podcast producers to prove who's listening to their show, because if you're a podcast listener, you're listening through Apple Podcasts, you're listening through Google Podcasts, you're listening through Spotify, Stitcher, something like that. They don't give us a lot of information about who's listening. And so I wanted to create a tool for podcast producers that would be helpful in giving advertisers more information. If you compare the revenue that podcasts get per listener to what a radio station gets, radio stations get exponentially more money per listener, for no apparent reason, except that the whole Nielsen Arbitron system is there to track how many people are within range of this transmitter and what's their average income and all that information. So they get a guess. They get a really good guess about who might be listening to this station. and based on, you know, like, oh, this is light adult contemporary, this station is playing this. um, Based on that, they know what kind of person listens to that, and based on the, yeah, all that stuff. So if we can kind of leapfrog that sort of problem, I think it would be helpful. So I'm building that through this platform called Gusher, that Rob Sanchez, who's my business partner at Mouth Media Network, introduced me to this guy, Chris Joyce, who started Gusher. It's gusher.co is the website for the platform. And you can build startups based on equity. So it's a side hustle platform. If you have a full-time job, you can go on this website and find projects where you sign up to get a percentage of a company in exchange for working on getting it started. You're building a minimum viable product, what they call the MVP. And that's what we're doing with the pod and my other projects there. Um, so yeah, if you have a lot of free time right now, I would say go check out Gusher. It's gusher.co, gusher.co. And my projects, I've got 3 on there right now. I've got the pod, and I've got Harmony, and the other one is called Augmented Group. This week, in terms of how I'm spending my time, I'm focusing a lot on the pod and a little bit on Augmented Group, getting ready for that. And we just signed on our CTO for the pod, so that's why I'm putting a lot of energy into that one, because I've got to get him kind of a technical outline, what we call a user narrative, so he can start outlining how we're building the system, and then we're, you know, bringing in software people and stuff. But you don't have to be a technical person to play a part in Gusher, because like my other one, Harmony, it's using a chatbot to do conflict mediation. So if there's an argument online, this chatbot, if you're a platform, you can have this chatbot installed, and so 2 people are arguing, and the argument can get flagged, and then this chatbot can show up and talk them down. And so we actually need to find a psychiatrist with a research background who can pull up all the information about conflict mediation and help us train a chatbot in conflict mediation, like step by step. How do you walk through it? So that's pretty interesting. And then Augmented Group is my augmented reality thing, where I'm looking at experience spaces. I want to do communal augmented reality experience spaces. And yeah, so all my projects are under this thing called Grayland Fireworks Corporation. And we don't actually make pyrochemical fireworks. We make metaphorical fireworks. It was the name came from the idea of, like, if you're in a gray landscape and it's kind of dusty, but then you see the furnace of an ironworks, and there's this flame in the distance, and it kind of cuts through the gray. And then also the idea of a skunk works, because a lot of my projects are, you know, almost all of my projects are under the radar most of the time. So it's also this idea of a secret lab. So Grayland Fireworks Corporation is my holding company. Yeah. So if you're interested in any of those, I actually have pitch videos up on gusher.co. You can go find me, Charles Beckwith, on Gusher, and look those up. Let's see, I have some notes here, so I make sure I get through. Yeah, all my projects are, I'm in fashion, I'm in media, I'm in tech, but they're almost always about community and communication, because that's where my head kind of stays. I'm always about connecting people. I think that's one of the most powerful human tools is the connection between people, because the technology doesn't get enabled until you enable the people around it to, you know, until the people connect to each other, the technology doesn't really work, like, ever. So that's where I live as a creative person, as an entrepreneur and as a part of any community I'm part of, I'm always working on building community and communication. Okay, so this is my question of the week for you. Um, do you think that we'll start to have quarantine hotels with different sections for people who arrive at different times? So if you cross an ocean, maybe you have to stay in a quarantine facility for 2 weeks involuntarily. Does millions of people walking right off planes from the other side of the world right into cities and countrysides seem like a good idea anymore? We quarantine for livestock, and there's a solid scientific reasoning behind that. Should we be doing it for people? It would certainly slow the world down a bit if we did. So, what are your thoughts on quarantine hotels? Is that a necessary thing? Um, would you still travel as much if you had to sit in quarantine for 14 days on both ends? Uh, that's it for me this week, and I think I'll do another one next week. We'll see.